Welcome to Serving Your Market as Kings or Queens. If you are looking for an interesting commercial, marketing, and sales podcast that is bold, unfiltered, unconventional, and authentic, you are at the right place. Curious how to play the game better and smarter? We will share how we crack the code to hyper growth for our customers. We will invite amazing people. We will share our experience, the first attempts in learning, cracking the code, and finally the results. And last but not least, we will give you food for thought. Now, let's get started.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the episode of Serving Your Market Like a King or Queen. And we welcome today Faye Hawkins. Hi, Faye. Welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Jeroen. Hi, Liesbeth.
Faye, myself and Liesbeth have worked together in the past, where our role was leading a B2B marketing agency. So working with well-known technology and business brands and clients, helping them to deliver the right message to the right people for commercial success. So Faye is now sitting on the other side of the fence, actually, as a CRO. So of Unlimited, an integrated agency group, which helps clients to gain deeper understanding of their customers, to deliver marketing and comms programs that outperform expectations. So again, welcome, Faye, and it's great to have you in. So could you tell a little bit more about what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. And thanks very much for having me on the show. I know, we go back a long way. But yeah, my role these days is all about helping our agency group to connect with the right brands. And, it might sound a little bit kind of counterintuitive, but, agencies suit certain brands and brands select agencies because they, feel like there's a good dynamic between them. So really it's all about, getting in front of the right kind of partners that we can work with, delivering our marketing programs and, helping those brands really, do something special that they haven't perhaps been able to achieve before. So it's all very exciting, and thank you for having me today. Very pleased to be here.
Great, thanks a lot, Faye. So what will today all be about, right? What will the conversation all be about? So the promise of this podcast. So Faye is invited as an expert to have a great dialogue with us about building engagement and driving revenue with content and conversations in a business to human world. So what we will hopefully we'll get out of this. So what's the biggest opportunity now? How do you maximize actually your content marketing efforts? And how do you define where to invest to realize your growth ambitions on both the sales and the marketing side? So super excited to kick this off and go deep into content and conversation. So thanks again for joining us, Faye. So before we start, right, it's a little bit of a tradition we've built up since the beginning of our podcast. So we have a drink with our guests. So what are you having, Faye?
Wow, I'm so glad you asked me. And thank you. I know you sent me something that, your thing that you send to your guests. I was out at the office yesterday, unusually, so I'm sorry I didn't pick it up. But today's special I'll introduce to you is Whitstable Bay Pale Ale, refreshingly light. Whitstable is a town on the coast in Kent, in the south of England, where I live, and it's famous for oysters. So this little tipple here has got citrus fruits and spice. And thank you for letting me kind of drink while I'm talking to you. All good. Yeah, I shall open it right now.
With the oysters. Sounds good.
Nice.
Yeah. What are you guys drinking?
Well, I'm drinking. It's not so common. It's a Slovenian white wine. Here it is. And it's a mixture. It's hand-picked. And it's a mixture of Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio. So, let's see how it tastes.
Oh, cheers.
Nice. So I'm having a beer. It's a special one, a craft one, the Moersleutel. And it's a little bit of a funky one, as you can see, right, Faye? So it's not your typical beer. The ingredients are, let me see. So it includes even hazelnut and cacao, vanilla. And obviously just the hops, right, of the beer. So, looking forward to it. And
funky.
Okay, then let's get funky then this episode. Cheers.
Yes, cheers.
Hey, what a wonder. you introduced you on your experience on business to business and business to consumer as well. But from my perspective, it feels like the world is changing and that you can't divide it anymore this way. What is your experience in the market and how do you deal with it? How you actually engage with the audience?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we've kind of been, having a conversation like this for a while, where the worlds of B2B and B2C have been colliding a little bit. And I guess a few years ago, it used to be B2B was quite sophisticated, B2B marketing, that is, in looking at, really deeper understanding of audiences and looking at personas and motivation and why would you buy this? Because the decision making was considered to be much more rational. So I guess, business brands felt like they had to work harder. So perhaps a little bit more kind of thinking went into that, kind of audience understanding. Whereas B2C, and I caveat this because I don't think this is really the case anymore. B2C, perhaps felt like, we're all consumers and we can look at things from a demographic point of view. So if you're of a certain age, if you're in a certain location, there's some of the markers that might help us understand you. And of course, that's not quite right, because in the end, whether you're buying something for a business or buying something for yourself, a personal life, you're still a human being. And so, the makeup of how you make a decision is exactly the same. And I think certainly, it's been common in B2C for some time, doing obviously research to understand audiences and get insights as to what sort of things might matter to them. But the world of kind of science and neuroscience has really come on so much in terms of how it applies to brands. And it feels like the balance has kind of shifted a little bit, that B2C brands are perhaps a bit ahead of the game here. They realise that, there's more to it, that how do they create kind of, human triggers that make an audience do certain things. And maybe B2B's got a little bit of catching up to do now. We've done things in the past which have perhaps been, interview based, like having a chat with customers and learning, what sort of motivations they might have had. But we perhaps haven't, scratched the surface too hard for B2B just yet as to what the science is behind all that.
Do you think do you think that's specifically the human voice is one of the big changes from a kind of what you say sophisticated corporate tone of voice, shifting to a more personalized human voice, like we're having our chat right now?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, it definitely seems to be the kind of direction of travel, doesn't it? This more kind of conversational approach to marketing. I think there's still a place for brands to communicate in a formal way if they're in, certain industries or where there's sensitivity. If there's complex information, you're still going to have to, unpack all of that and deliver it. But yeah, absolutely, it just makes sense, doesn't it? When you look at it objectively, we're having a conversation because we can therefore understand each other. Like, that's ultimately what sales is all about anyway, trying to get, a one-to-one conversation going. So that, expanding that into a marketing conversation, into an advocacy conversation, it just, all makes sense when you put it together and look at it from that perspective. I think we perhaps just haven't thought about it in that way before.
Yeah, that makes absolutely sense. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I think you touch on an interesting point also, Faye, there, that it's about connecting these things, right? It's the sales conversation, right? It's the marketing conversation. It's the customer success or support or whatever, right? It's that whole chain which you actually build up in a relationship, right? With a customer, right? For example, and that is looking at the external side of things, right? But what role does content, in your view, play also in building relationships with your internal audience, right?
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of it, I'd imagine, depends on the size of the organisation that you work in. But most teams are of a kind of manageable size, and there's tons of organisational research out there, isn't there, about how organisations communicate, and the weekly email from the chief exec has its place, for sure. But yeah, the more kind of you can get content to do the work, the easier it is to scale. So conversations really count, but in the end, people need reference material, and just changing the use of enablement type content. Where do you keep the content? All of those things are starting to be expanded in many of the clients that we work with. I imagine that's probably similar for some of your clients too, how they're looking at internal comms as part of a holistic picture.
Yeah, it's internal comms or internal comms. What we see as well, right, Liesbeth, is that they probably help other departments how they can best equip and enable, for example, other departments, right? Just to give you an example, if you would want to implement successfully, for example, a new approach for segmentation, such as ICP, the internal content around that to enable and equip a sales team to effectively start adopting that, right, and understanding that in a fun and impactful way is, yes, it will cost you probably time, right, but it is time that is worth it, right, because the times, if you want to have an integrated department, right, that goes to market together, you need to help each other also to become better, right, and content could be an interesting vehicle for that, right, and that is more or less then maybe comms could help in facilitating that indeed, but like you said, that lives then probably next to the CEO email and so on and those types of things. But the equipment and the enablement is I think an interesting point what we see coming across. Is that something which you see also in your conversations or in the market?
Yeah, no, definitely, and because organizations still are changing themselves, and introducing new concepts. It might be adopting ICP or moving towards a certain type of model or whatever it is. You can still apply a lot of the same content journey logic to that, and I think perhaps we're not structured enough in how we look at sharing content internally. I think in the past we've perhaps been guilty of creating a kind of sales toolkit, but haven't perhaps thought about the stages that might go ahead of that. Explaining what's the purpose of the program, the campaign, whatever it is that we're doing, and perhaps just getting a little bit more granular about where are people actually at on their journey internally. So there are definitely some parallels, aren't there, about how we've looked at content for external audiences, and how you might kind of create a kind of life cycle. But it's an interesting point that you make, that we should be doing more of that from an internal point of view. So I'll make a note of that as well. I think it's a good point.
Nice.
But it's very funny that we talk about it right now, because this week I had a conversation with a relation about this, to talk about how far would you like to go to invest in actually building that whole, what you're saying, that journey or that nurture flow internally. Because not everyone is on the same level. They have a different understanding. They have a different need. Why should I know it? How is it going to help me? Instead of only, it's good for you to know. Yeah, but if they don't feel the urgency, they won't read it, even though you share it. And also the timing, what is a good moment to share something? I know one of my pitfalls was, always waiting because you were expecting, for example, kind of next stage tomorrow. So, okay, I'm not going to communicate today because tomorrow I have better information. And then tomorrow becomes the day after. And before you know, you are weeks after, and nobody knows what you are doing as a person or as a department, but also so suddenly you have a kind of gap between a kind of the first steps of exploring new things, and suddenly there is something new. That's at least my experience, and I hear it very often with clients and so on. So that's I think very important to invest time and money as well to build an internal audience. And specifically when I know the company we worked for a former director always said everyone is in sales. And that's very good to say, but that would mean that you need to have a good understanding of actually, why you exist as a company.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point, actually. By the way, I read something around that, and I saw a lot of engagement on it and comments on it. it was a guy who posted something around that everybody should know the sales pitch, right? And then a lot of people started to react on that and said, yeah, but then they should also know how for example, the CS department works, right? Or how the marketing strategy is and so on. But I was thinking, actually, why do we still call it a sales pitch? If it's especially if the pitch is far much more from a company perspective, right? And sometimes it's also just about naming it differently. If you say it's the company pitch, and everybody should understand the company pitch, right? Because that has an impact on brand and experience, and everybody should tell the same story. Then I don't think anybody will disagree with that, right? But and I think sometimes just making small tweaks, right, and then putting it up into a level where it's a company pitch, that sounds, of course, the right thing to do.
It brings you to kind of next dimension or something. It's same like what most companies call the sales funnel. But why do you call it a sales funnel? It's really connected to the department. Why not your revenue funnel? Because so much more departments are involved in your whole revenue, and not only sales and marketing, but also, of course, delivery, the project managers who also do upsell, cross-sell. So at the end, it's the whole revenue funnel.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Then, a lot of these kind of old terminologies they've come out of business books that were written in the 1980s, haven't they? And it's not, and it's not that they're wrong. It's just that things have kind of progressed a little bit from there. And I mean, you guys will know, like some of the the work that we often do or have done in the past for kind of B2B, B2C clients is actually helping them to articulate the essence of who they are and what they do. And it's really difficult, as you know. It's so difficult to do it, particularly within your own organization, just to get that objectivity. But it's really necessary, because it literally unlocks everything. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's being able to write the email that says, I work for such and such, and we are and you know what it is, and like everybody says the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's true. So you think, if you talk about that, it's also kind of content, conversations. Of course, it's your values and why you exist, but if you look at that perspective, so what is the biggest opportunity from a content perspective?
Yeah,
in this day.
So there's tons of more conversational ways that you're much more familiar with podcasts like this and video, and just using more kind of I guess interactive media. And the thing that really changes is the authenticity of it. If you have, if you take a website that's got our kind of mission statement on it, it feels completely different to having someone just talk about it and like, this is what we're really passionate about, and this is what matters to us as an organization. And just that kind of change of delivery actually makes a massive impact for content. And I think the days of one-dimensional PDFs that house some greatness are kind of a little bit behind us anyway. I think the whole screen fatigue that we're all kind of going through, I think the change of us, much more people working from home, those limitations of using video in marketing are starting to go away, because obviously people are much more kind of less inhibited about what they're looking at during their work time. You've got mobiles that are able to deliver content in a different way. People are out listening to podcasts, and adoption of podcasts is going through the roof. So yeah, I think as long as you're clear about what you want to say, and that it matters, and that you're saying it to the right people, the vehicle of how you say it has got huge opportunity around it right now. And I'm sure you've had the same experience, with your podcast. It just gives a real flavour of like, who are the actual people, and to what extent do they have purpose, and are they authentic, and all of those things that you can't get off a page.
Absolutely. And also, if you talk about podcasts, for example, it's also investing in the long term. It's your audience is so different listening to a podcast, for example, or following you on LinkedIn. Sometimes that's combined, but you reach different audiences. And at the end, the bigger the spread, the more familiar your brand becomes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the question then though, right, it just made me think of this, is the podcast has to be really true to your brand, and so do the people, because, you know, the host makes a massive difference as much as the guests, don't they? So it's a good thing you guys have, you know, got stunning personalities and, you know, kind of living the dream here.
Yes, we are. We really are. Sorry, but yes, we are.
Yeah, that's what I mean, though. Like, you know, going through the motions with conversational marketing doesn't cut it, does it? It has to be something that actually, you know, you believe in, because it is personal at this level. You know, I'm talking to you guys about things that matter to you, that might matter to your clients, to your customers, and, you know, therefore we're all in the same group. So it has to, you know, be relevant and authentic.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I wouldn't say I didn't think about it that way, but how you connect your personalities to it as well, and how you come in contact with an audience based on that. I didn't think about it from that perspective that much, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love a good podcast. I know we were talking about you know, some of these, you know, the ways that you can use content and be, you know, really kind of effective. So conversational marketing, definitely, you know, there's a big opportunity there. But if you think about it, you know, the fact that you're, you know, we're having a conversation now means that we've had a conversation, which was, you know, should we be, you know, talking together, and what topics might we talk about, and where can we add some value? And, you know, you know this, and all the podcast fans out there, you know, when you're recruiting people to be your guests, you know, you're talking to prospects, you could be talking to internal people that, you know, perhaps stakeholders that you need to get on board with something. You know, there's incremental gains every time you invite someone, and then how you use the content we've just talked about. You know, there's lots of opportunities, but, you know, you can slice it and dice it and deliver different social audiences and use it in more written form. Great for SEO. So many kind of ticks that are just based on a conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that, Faye, and I think what you're actually saying now as well. I think a lot of organizations start actually a podcast, right? To, for example, on the highest level, right, become a thought leader on a certain topic or so on. It will probably also have an objective around, brand, setting their brand into the market, right, creating awareness and so on. But yeah, what we see now more often, right, and I think the examples that you gave as well, right, it is a fantastic platform also for networking, right, and creating valuable relations with whoever stakeholders, right. It could be prospects, customers. That sometimes is too much being seen just as an awareness vehicle, where it can open a lot more, right, for a company.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we touched on it earlier, because of course, you know, it's a great tactic for awareness, but the nature of the conversation and, you know, how you conduct the conversation really makes a massive difference, doesn't it? And I know you guys are Clubhouse fans as well. Like, that's, you know, another conversational platform that, you know, but all the marketing brands are all kind of clamoring after. But, you know, like we said, it's the ones that are going to stay the course are actually going to be, you know, saying something real and really interesting. So yeah, it's important for brands to not forget that, you know, just because they've got something to say doesn't mean people want to listen.
Yeah, but I think conversational marketing is till now, and I'm not talking about companies, you know, who are doing a good job in that already, but it feels always like, you know, it's based on your own interest, or, you know, that you believe in it and do it. So actually, how do you think you should bring your conversational marketing? How do you plan on that? How do you build your strategy around that? Because it asks more than only the marketing director or whatever the role is, saying, okay, we're going to do this. Like in the old days, we produce a content piece. Okay, there's a subject matter expert involved, and there it is. We have it on the shelf, and let's use it. So this is so much more effort, dedication, continuity.
Yeah. It's similar though, isn't it? Because you know, I guess often the process for creating good content relies on subject matter experts. You know, they're the people that actually have the knowledge. They're the people with the stories, the people that have been there, done that, spoken to the customer, got something right, got something wrong. You know, even when we've been creating content that, you know, is perhaps slightly less conversational in its output, there's always a conversation to get to the output.
True.
And, you know, that those kind of, you know, subject matter expert interviews, maybe we'll start to see, you know, because that's quite a common practice, and, you know, clearly it works because, you know, people still consume blogs. It's just turning that content and those kind of perhaps briefing conversations into more kind of podcast, vlog, video type content, because it's all there, isn't it? And then, you know, it's just a different type of editing when you're actually writing it in, you know, in text form rather than as something that's a bit more multimedia.
Yeah, I like that, Faye. So, and I think that's also actually an interesting point to come up to, right? Because there are a lot of options, so to say, right? In content and conversations, right? I think we touched on things like podcast, conversational marketing. We even talked about there's still a place and a time, probably a little bit for some audiences for the traditional PDF and so on. But what would be your advice to the audience on how to start with maximizing your content efforts? What do you need to do then?
Yeah, and you know, that's it's a short question and a, you know, potentially a massively long answer. So I'll try and keep it brief for you. But you know, I think, you know, perhaps it's common knowledge, isn't it, that not all content is great content, and just because you've created some content, it does not mean you're doing content marketing. So I think, you know, we've touched on a couple of these areas before, but, you know, actually understanding the audience still and always will be the number one thing that makes a difference in the quality of the content. You know, why you're creating content in the first place. And, you know, a lot of people don't really ask that question. It's because we're doing it for marketing or because we're trying to sell whatever we're trying to sell. But, you know, but from the individual's point of view, why would you bother consuming it? You know, I'm not consuming it necessarily always because I'm already thinking about buying a product. So it has to be, you know, it's a phrase we've probably used, you know, for a number of years, but what's the value in the content? And, you know, is there something original? Is there some insight in there? Am I going to learn something? And I think, you know, I find a lot of content is a bit kind of bland. And, you know, it looks nice, it's been designed beautifully, and, you know, the world has enough ebooks in it already. So yours has to be good. It needs to be really interesting. And, you know, you might get me in there with a great podcast, but what are you going to follow up with next? And if it falls flat and, you know, you suddenly revert to more kind of perhaps less well considered or formulaic marketing, it's still not going to work anyway. So
that's the word interesting, Faye. I find that interesting, let's say. I hear more often also coming up in the market, I see things around going for a more journalistic approach. But yeah, I'm curious on what your view and experience with that is.
Yeah.
And why are organizations taking that approach?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, it was definitely a trend when, you know, content marketing first, you know, was invented, if that's such a thing, you know, a few years ago, where there was a bit of a shift from marketing content, which was very much kind of externalized perspective of, you know, we think these things are important and so should you, to more kind of, you know, the journalistic perspective is really just having that objectivity and actually understanding, you know, what is it that people want to read and what is going to be helpful to them. So I guess it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid of both, but, you know, certainly an editorial perspective when you're creating content makes a massive difference. You know, as you go through a, you know, kind of content journey, there is a place for straightforward, rational, just tell me what it is and what it does information. But, you know, that people are already quite a long way down their own level of understanding before they get there. So the editorial thing really comes in when we're connecting with, you know, issues, problems, opportunities, topics, calendar items. Is it Christmas or is it raining? And like, how do you connect with the current state that people are in,
Exactly.
and then trigger them to actually continue that journey. That's the bit I think that often doesn't get quite enough attention. We'll come up with some ideas, but perhaps haven't quite road tested them about, is that really what matters? And is that what's going to actually, get people to connect with us for the first time, for instance, or actually engage with us? And there's lots of testing that can be done. I think, that it's kind of an emerging area for content. I suppose I see quite a lot of clients, and, we do it too, that you do content analytics. Did it work? Which is not quite the same as content, test from a predictive point of view. Like, will it work? Because often, stuff things get launched, and there's a huge amount of investment and logic, and it all looks great, and then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, and we'll find out. But that's the long way around, really, isn't it? If you spend 2 years.
I like that one, and I think maybe one example to mention, right, Liesbeth, from content we created. What is it, 5-6 years ago or so in our previous company? We created maybe a funny thing to mention. That's a different type of predictive analytics, so to say. But we created a content piece there, which was around 2015. It was around the changing guide of the guide of the changing role of the IT manager. So we sketched the world as it was now, and 2020. And actually, we revisited that content piece, and it was rather accurate, so to say. So I think we predicted it not from an analytics perspective, but at least in 5 years' time, how the role would evolve. So that was quite fun, actually.
Maybe we have some other skills as well, Jeroen, that we can look into the future.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen. So just, if you just act on that.
Yeah, exactly.
On the safe side.
I think you just invented content intuition.
Yes, exactly. Here it is. We have a new word.
Yeah, nice. One other thing, Faye, that's more around... the trend is now on that the buyer wants to stay longer anonymous, right? Or at least, what type of advice would you give to marketing teams, right? Which normally probably have been gating a lot of content.
I think the advice here really is just to relax, isn't it? Because so what if you can't see their every move? You can still see when they're starting to get into a sales engagement, and then if you've got the right software and the right plans and understanding, you can see where did they come from and what's the lead source, and maybe what have they anonymously done. So it's kind of all it's done is kind of shift the point at which we can measure. So you have to roll with how the buyers are behaving. And, it's with good reason, isn't it? We're all human beings. What's going to happen if you fill in a form. You'll suddenly be more marketed to. Whereas if you don't, you might get content that you can, consume at your own leisure. You might even read the same stuff that you would have been sent if you. And
you will be influenced anyhow, right? But I like that. So this is, I would say, definitely one for the audience to note, right? And I think it's especially interesting because you mentioned this obviously with a solid marketing background, and now having a CRO role, and where typical we see that CROs have a sales-driven role, right? But I think you're putting the buyer at first, right? And it's all about getting that engagement and helping the buyer to move along, right? Then it will happen anyhow, right? It's not about generating as much leads as possible with your downloads, right? Because if the downloads doesn't convert, right, then we still have a mortgage to pay, right? And we can't pay our mortgage with just a bunch of MQLs. So I think that's a very interesting point you mentioned. Yeah. Thanks.
I mean, I think there's a lot to be gained from measurement. Absolutely, no question. But the big picture really is, can we correlate what we're doing from a marketing point of view with what's happening from a sales perspective? And maybe you can, these attribution models that, probably drive everybody nuts. You can see some of this stuff, and like that's really helpful. But at the same time, if you're doing the right things from a marketing point of view, and we're in front of the right people, we're saying things that we know are of interest to them, and that we are relevant as a brand, like when we're, being the right kind of value-driven, authentic organization that actually matters to them. Like that's really what it's all about, because, they're the people that are actually going to buy from you, and everybody else who might be downloading stuff, so what? They're not going to end up in your kind of sales funnel in any case. So I think we can worry.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the old school? We talked about sales funnel, or the specific wordings that were used, and that you maybe should change it. But also in terms of metrics, KPIs, it's also a kind of old school thing. If it's not contributing to business or contributing to long-lasting and happy customers, I won't say what's the use, but I think we're coming in a time also when you connect it to that conversational marketing, you have to measure in a different way. You can't keep on, because it's the measurement then, if we talk about this podcast, hey, we only had 50 views. Is that the value, or is the value, it's really from a content syndication point of view. You have it on YouTube, you have it on Spotify, you promote it on LinkedIn. What you said, you can get clips out of it, you can create written content out of it. So you can do so much things with it, also in terms of efficiency. And also, so you can imagine you're kind of multiplying your audience, because they're all on different channels.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, I'm not sure, I mean, maybe there's people out there that are way more sophisticated about it, but, when I and my team are publishing content, we're looking at, which channel has delivered the right, certain level of awareness and engagement. We're looking at the topics, but actually, I guess we haven't really gone back a step, because the origin of a piece of content might just be a single conversation, and we've repurposed it 4 or 5 times. So I think you're totally right, Liesbeth. We should be thinking more about, which conversations actually have mattered, as much as like, how did we deliver the conversation?
Exactly. So, yeah, I like that combination.
Yeah. And you're right, because the conversation should continue, shouldn't it? I think, it's a new lens of like how you might look at, the success of marketing. And, can you continue a conversation, for instance, from, an early stage awareness with a particular prospect? So let's say those 50 views, how many of those can we continue a conversation where we're talking about, their business, and, are we understanding things? Are we giving you things that matter to you when they become a client or a customer? Continue the conversation and learn some things. And, I think that would be a really interesting way of looking at success, wouldn't it? Because the whole point, like we said at the beginning of this discussion anyway, is to actually have a conversation. That's how everything gets bought, essentially, in B2B, isn't it, at some level?
Yes, and I think also, how do you keep driving that conversation? Because at the end, I think it's the same like the personal relationships with friends or your relatives. Of course you can say, I have a very good friend. It doesn't matter if I don't speak to her for a year, we are still good. Okay, you're still good. But the chance is big that you really missed out of things, maybe they celebrated something, or they lost an important person, and you don't have a clue what is happening. So at the end, you miss the real opportunity, you miss at the end. So of course you're good. That's same way with your business relations, you're good, but you miss the opportunity of, that they were in a certain need, and you weren't there at the moment.
Yeah, no, you're totally right.
Actually, it's not, when we're talking about business to business, business to consumers. At the end, I think you mentioned it before, Jeroen, it's human to human. I think it's not that of course, that there in business there's less emotion, more connected to budgets, more decision makers. So it's a little bit more complex maybe. But at the same time, it's how you invest. And that's, I think, in this different way of this conversational marketing, that you really have to believe in it and really start building up whole strategy or planning on it. And also, chasing is not the right word, but maybe inspiring your colleagues to do the same, because the more are acting the same, the better it will be.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? How, we've got all this amazing, technology out there, and, we've advanced so much in all these different areas of science and marketing, and actually all we really need to do is talk to each other.
Yeah, maybe
it's so simple.
But still, one question here to ask. If you talk about content, I know you have experience with balancing HQ or central requirements, and also dealing with cultural differences in the field. So how, if you, let's say you create a whole strategy around this conversational marketing, how are you going to deal with those differences or different requirements? Do you have any experience with that?
Oh yeah, God, tons, Liesbeth. And it's different. It's different for every client, but often the challenge is the same. That you can't really, you wouldn't expect every buyer to behave in exactly the same way, and you wouldn't do that because they're individuals. So why would you expect content that is delivered as a package, as a formula, to actually work with a high number of people? Because it stands to reason, probability says it won't. So I think that kind of encapsulates the challenge a little bit, doesn't it? And we're all different. So wherever you are in the world, you will want to have a local conversation at some level. And that's not to say that perhaps what comes through as content from HQ is completely redundant. I think the practicality and resources generally come into play as well, don't they? That we're not going to reinvent the wheel 36 times, for instance. But I think it's just choosing how to use it in the right way, and there has to be a balance. I think to do engagement at local level, you have to have a local conversation, however you deliver it. And whether that's through local content, whether it's through local podcasts, local events, something has to happen there. And then, what we've done in the past with other clients is use that for kind of initial engagement, and then drop them into what might be a kind of centralized marketing program, or use that HQ content a bit further down the line. Because it does have, it's not that it doesn't have any value. And I think, probably there are tons of HQ global marketers out there that curse these, local marketing marketing teams that pretty much throw it away straight away. Yeah. So I think it's just getting the balance right, really, isn't it? And trying to be sensible about it. And you have to. I think buyers probably also accept a little bit of formula, as in like it's the same for different brands. Mm-hmm. You always know on TV when you see an ad that's for us, when you see a European ad, and the dubbing slightly out with the lip sync and that kind of thing, but it doesn't change your interaction with it necessarily. So I think humans perhaps a bit more adaptable than that, but just trying to have a conversation in the first place, probably I would say should be a local thing.
Yes, and maybe because I've been at both sides, maybe because from my perspective, it was really a benefit of having a kind of central setup, or getting things delivered centrally. But at the same time, reserve some budgets and think about how are you actually maybe going to localize the content. Could be for your specific country, it could be a cultural thing, but it could also be that you're saying, okay, this content is great, but how am I going to adjust it that it's suitable, for example, for a certain industry? Mm-hmm. Instead of thinking, okay, we don't need to create content ourselves, but make a kind of small reservation of that you can actually connect it to your audience. Doesn't matter, if it's what the reason is, but maybe that could be of help as well. Instead of saying, hey, the content is not good, because I know from my experience that's not the case. Mm-hmm. It's more about how do you make that fit?
Yeah. No, you're totally right, exactly. And, just repurposing what you do have is always a good way to go for anything related to content, because we all know it's hard to get it right. It takes time to actually produce, and you're better off being in market. So use what you have, adapt it where you need to, add something local if you can, and that should give you a much higher success rate. And I would say though, often when there's a kind of HQ and field kind of setup, and most international organisations have it at some level, or they have to. A bit of autonomy in the local marketing setup usually goes a long way. Because often I find that sales teams usually have some free rein to do what they need to do, and they might join various kind of local associations or trade bodies or whatever it might be, and that's fine. They're allowed to do that because that's how they're going to do networking. The same privilege should be allowed to marketers who should be able to therefore do some local marketing so that we can get in front of the right people. So it's not a kind of either or. In my very humble personal opinion, I think you should do a little bit of both, central and local.
Balancing and hybrid, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, Faye, you're a couple of months in now, right? Into the new year, and probably with you all our sales, marketing, and revenue leaders as well who are listening in. So you are a CRO with a marketing background, and I hear your passion for content and conversations, right? And really connecting with the audience, but also, the drill that there needs to be a mortgage needs to be paid, right? So there needs to be engagement, needs to be turning into revenue. So how do you define actually if you need to invest in content, right? And let's say content a little bit more on the maybe marketing side, right? Or in conversations, right? When you are not on track for delivering your annual revenue number.
Yeah. Isn't that a good question? So I suppose I can give the benefit of my experience in that. The way that I would look at it is, timing is a huge issue here, because businesses don't really wait, and how the shape of your pipeline looks in your sales cycle, actually they're the factors that matter as to where you should invest. Because let's say we've got 6 months to go before we need to hit our number, whatever it might be. If you have a load of stuff in pipeline and all we've got to do is try and push that through, then that's the place to have the conversation. And the type of conversation that you might have with leads or opportunities that are already in view could be more about using third-party endorsement or doing some kind of more background awareness level advertising, just so that they've got that whole kind of brand reference. You can be more explicit. You can actually invite some of these guys to smaller events. You could put them in some in pipeline nurture, where you're giving them examples of work, or here's some awards, and you're just creating that picture for them that yes, you're in the right place here, so just go for it and continue your kind of sales journey. So that might be exactly the right thing to do if you've got quite a lot of stuff in pipeline from a short-term perspective. But then if you've got a big mountain to climb, a big target to hit, you might be entering a new market, launching a new product. You've really got to look at the whole thing a bit more kind of holistically. But and I think just trying to be realistic as well, of looking at sizing the market and what sort of numbers would we put into our conversion. So what does good really look like before we've tried it? And then doing all of that kind of approach that we've talked about. How do you say the right things? How do we find a way to matter? How do we be authentic? All of that. The hard yards at the beginning for me is always worth it. Really getting into the detail and understanding the audience. Number one, what matters to them, what triggers them, checking we're saying the right things, doing the testing. Because by the time you're 6 months down the line and you're having a chat with the chief exec about how the numbers looking, we need to know it's going to work. So it's worth doing the homework up front.
Talking about content that is triggering, Faye, can we talk about it for you personally?
Content that I like.
Yeah, or at least content what really triggered you, that you really thought, this is the direction I would like to go, or that's connected to my aspirations.
Well, there's one that springs to mind, and it's I don't know how helpful or relevant it is, but I'll tell you why I liked it. And I'm quite a fan of retargeting, so I quite like the fact that some brands still consider me to be a human being. I might be interested in accountancy software ever while I'm doing my business engagement stuff on LinkedIn, but if you suddenly appear in my Facebook feed, I'm like, okay, so you do know that I'm a real person. So I'm quite a fan of retargeting. I think that it works really nicely for B2B brands particularly. But yeah, I had this thing over the summer, and I guess it just struck me as a really well put together kind of approach, because it was for VW camper vans. And so we're all in this awful lockdown experience. They actually profiled me really well, as in, I don't have one. Have I ever looked at their website before? Yes. Have I ever searched for anything like that before? Yes. Have I got children that might fit in one? Yes. So all these things, I was like, wow, you've really kind of done this so well. And I kept spotting these kind of push ads appearing on Facebook that just looked really like aspirational. So the message was great, the visuals looked great, it's proper escapism. It's like, great, I'm gonna have a quick look at this. And then so good. So I put my email address in so that I could see, because I'm female and it matters what this thing looks like, not how it drives. So they were like,
I don't completely agree with you, Faye.
Huge generalization. Huge generalization, but they got it right for me. And they were like, look, you can make it red and put silver on it. And I was like, right, cool, this is great. So I'll do the configurator, I'll sign up. They sent me all this stuff. They sent me this beautiful kind of pack, direct mail pack, which I still have. So I didn't buy one, but I'm totally sold on the brand. So for me, that was like an actual marketing highlight ever. I thought they just put the whole thing together so well and thought about all the different touch points and channels, and they got the message right. They got me right. So that was quite impressive, I felt. It does work.
You've bought two of them now?
Well, so funny you mention it. Now that the showrooms are open, I'm going to go and see one.
Oh, really?
Wow!
So
yeah.
You said I didn't buy them. You said that, so
not yet.
I was asking. Not yet. That was the thing.
Not yet. Not yet. I'm sure they'll think of something that might get me all the way to the end of that little odyssey.
Yeah. But I think in this, it's also connecting all those dots in terms of the way they present themselves, the way where you have freedom, the way that you feel, hey, you really understand me. The whole package.
Yeah, that's totally it though, Liesbeth, because that's what matters, that it feels like they understand you. And that's everything we've been talking about, isn't it? It's having a conversation that you actually want to be a part of.
Cool.
So yeah, well done, VW.
Nice.
Wow, nice.
I think that's a great example, and I'm inspired by the story. So thanks for sharing, Faye. But overall scene, I think was a great conversation. So I think we learned a lot, right? I think we have been delving into the topic of building engagement and driving revenue with content and conversations in a business to human world. We have a better understanding. I've learned a lot about biggest opportunities to address and take now, right? How can you maximize your content marketing efforts? And as a CRO, how would you actually define where to invest to realize your ambitious annual revenue number? So, and I've got some inspiration on the content you shared on the aspirational identity. So, yeah, super. Thanks a lot for that. So,
not at all. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's always nice to chat with you both.
Yeah, good. So, if the audience wants to reach out to you, right, and wants to get a better understanding of some of the topics you addressed, or just want to receive a picture from you in the car when you bought them, how can they reach out to you? Is that via LinkedIn or email?
you can find me on LinkedIn. Absolutely. I'm CRO at Unlimited Group. The unlimitedgroup.com website has got some pretty cool stuff on there about human understanding and, how do you better understand audiences to unlock all of this stuff. So yeah, plenty of stuff there. I have my own podcast as well, the Lab Leaders. Obviously not quite as exciting as yours, I imagine. But yeah, there's look me up on LinkedIn, and anyone who connects with me, I can happily share some of these details. But thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Faye. It was a pleasure for us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Faye, for being our amazing guest. And all right, we'll see everybody next time. So thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Serving Your Market as Kings or Queens. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll catch you in the next episode.